This is a demonstration of Cisco application-centric infrastructure and Mirantis Fuel. This is a diagram of the logical topology used for deploying the Fuel environment. Here you can see we have a number of VLANs all deployed over a single interface, exposed to several VLANs out of the ACI fabric. This is the environment that we're using for the deployment. In addition, we've already set up an L3 out on the external network that we will be referencing as part of this deployment. The first step in the deployment is to copy the Fuel plugin onto the Fuel node and install it using this command. As you can see, the install is quick and has completed successfully. Next, we can go over to the Fuel dashboard. Here we are logging into Fuel directly. Now it's time to create the new OpenStack environment using Fuel. We'll give this a name and show that it's based off the Kilo version of OpenStack for Mirantis 7 on Ubuntu 14.04. We'll choose the KVM hypervisor and we'll choose the Neutron with VLAN networking, although we can change this later as we configure the ACI specific portions. That's all that's necessary. We hit create and the environment is now prepared. Now it's time to configure the ACI plugin as part of this deployment. You'll see we have the ACI OpFlex plugin screen, which we enable by checking the box on this tab. We have the choice between using an ML2 driver or the group-based policy version of the APIC plugin. As part of the configuration, we need to specify the APIC host, IP address, username, and password. These credentials are used by the Neutron plugin. We have the option of choosing the VLAN or VXLAN mode of operation for OpFlex. For this deployment, we'll use VXLAN. We also need to input the infrastructure VLAN configured within ACI for OpFlex to use. We'll also be checking to use LDP. And in this particular environment, we don't have VPC or shared L3 context. We have already created an L3 out, and we'll be using this pre-existing L3 out in this case. We'll enter the information for it here, including the L3 out name and the external EPG that we've already created. These will be referenced in the Neutron configuration files as external networks are later created in the OpenStack environment. We've also enabled optimized DHCP and optimized metadata service here. That's all that's needed. Now we click Save for the environment. The next step in our deployment is to set up the Networks tab. Here we have to configure the public network for the OpenStack environment. The first step will be set the VLAN tag to 101, which is what we had chosen to use for the public network in this case. We also have to update the management network to be network 103, as per our earlier choice as well. The next step is to update the IP address ranges and CIDR for this network. We'll start by setting the CIDR to the 192.168 space that we've assigned and choosing IP address range within that space for this network. Next, we set the gateway for this network. Fuel requires that we set a floating IP range through this interface, even though in the ACI plugin, we don't directly use this information. That's why we've chosen a relatively small subnet for the allocation. Finally, we hit save on this part of the fuel interface. The next step is to actually boot our controller and our compute nodes over Pixie. That's happening in the background now, and we're actually waiting for Fuel to begin discovering them. As we can see, the first node has actually been discovered. For the purpose of this demo, I've accelerated that process in the background. Now we can actually add this node as a controller and give it a useful name. We hit Apply Changes, add it to the Fuel environment. Now we can go ahead and configure interfaces on it. As you can see, we have a single interface with all of the Fuel networks available on that interface that will be running over our ACI fabric. Now we can see some other nodes have become available and discovered as they've been booting and coming online. Let's add these as well. Next, we can add a compute node. We'll name one of our compute nodes Compute 01 and the other one Compute 02. Let's hit Apply Changes and add these to the Fuel environment as well. With that, we've completed the configuration steps that we need, and we're ready to deploy our Fuel environment. We hit Deploy Changes and hit Deploy to actually allow Fuel to begin deploying our nodes. This actually takes a long time, but as you can see here, we've accelerated that to show you the successful deployment has completed. To show you what that looks like, one of the things we're going to do is pop over to the APIC itself, and actually you can see if we go inside our VM networking tab that our Opflix agents actually are up and configured on our ACI fabric. We can open VM networking controllers, the OpenStack 1 domain that we've created, and we can see the different Fuel nodes. At the moment, we don't have any networks, but now we can go ahead and use OpenStack to create those and utilize our environment. Those are the steps required for deploying Mirantis OpenStack with Cisco ACI using the Fuel plugin.